Makes a huge difference if you'll do me a favor by subscribing and liking the podcast wherever you listen. It goes a long way. Thanks, and I hope you enjoy. In the AI era, the organizations that win are the ones that make their people more valuable, not the ones that race to replace them. Steve Cadigan helps leaders unlock the human advantage that compounds into competitive advantages others can't replicate. He was the chief human resources officer for LinkedIn. He was the first chief human resources officer, and he led the talent push from 400 to 4,000 people in 3.5 years as architected its world famous company culture. He has spent the last 30 years leading talent and culture at Fortune 500 companies and today serves on the board of 3 corporations. He works directly with CEOs and CHROs at scaling organizations who are deploying AI and need a strategy that makes their people more valuable, not less. All right, Steve, welcome to the Wisdom of Life.
Great to be here. Great to be here.
I want to start with, I don't normally start here, but I want to start with why did you say yes to me? Why is this important to you to share what you've learned?
I think there today in the world that we live in, there are a lot of stories that were being told by people on, who are in the sort of like this unreachable, crazy, universe that may sound good, but I feel like my story is raw and real. And I feel like in listening to some of the episodes and work that you've done, you're looking for real. And it's a big part of my platform right now is the human advantage and trying to find, it's never been a greater time to be a human being. And we're in a time when there's an over obsession with technology and there's great merits and benefits for that. But I think we need to remember, that technology is here to serve us. And so I think that's an important conversation to be having.
For sure. For sure. And so we were talking offline before, right? And this has happened so many times. I wish we would have recorded it. But there's some beauty to that we didn't. So yeah, when we look back at your journey, right? Steve Jobs famously said, I'm sure he didn't come up with this, it came from somewhere else, but like it's easier to connect the dots looking backwards than it is to connect dots looking forwards in your life and career. And you had just said that you're able now to do, you said 3 things, 3 connections of dots. And I'm not going to finish it. I want you to finish what you're able to do now because of the work you did and what you learned.
Yeah, I feel really, really fortunate to be in a place where I can work with who I want, when I want, right? And on what I want, right? Do what you want, when you want, with who you want. And that is a very simple explanation of what I think is career success. Right. And I probably worked a fair number of people that I didn't want to, they wouldn't have been my first choice, but I wasn't given a choice at certain points in my career. I probably say a few years in, if someone were to say, "Hey, tell me all the things you learned about leadership," I'd say probably most of that was how not to lead from the people that I saw around me. And I bet most of the listeners right now, if you think about, and I coach entrepreneurs, particularly right now in Europe, we start with the conversation about leadership, like who influenced your view on what a leader should do? Because it's all over the map, and there is no right or wrong. You need to be led and want to be led differently than I want to be led. But I'm just curious, where did that come from? And it's ranges from parents and relatives to business leaders to athletic figures and so forth. And that's just really, really interesting to me. We all have a different framework for how, we think we should be led. Right. And there is no one ultimate right leadership methodology. I think there's some fundamentals that are pretty important to have in the mix. But, over a course of my career, gosh, I had a chance to work in 6 different industries. I was raised in South Africa and the United States. I've lived and worked in Canada, Singapore, and the US, and have done M&A transactions in, I don't know, 30, 40 countries. A lot of them in Israel over time. And man, it's just been a great laboratory to see a diversity of different approaches to this universe of leadership, and that I feel, back to your original question, those 3 things, I think the depth of diversity of my path has given me a real unique insight that, fortunately for me, other people find it useful still.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
great. You know, not my teenage kids, by the way,
Right,
but hopefully other
right.
people.
I can relate to that. Yeah, there at that age, right? I remember being a teenager and thinking, man, my parents don't know anything. And then the funny thing was, on a little side note, The funny thing is I would go to a friend's house, I would listen to my friend's parents, or I'd listen to the coach, the teacher, or someone like that. So it wasn't about that age, it was about that emotional block for me. I don't know if this resonates with you at all. And then I would come home to dinner and I would say, "Man, Matt's dad or Rick's mom said this." And my gosh, the light bulb went on. And my dad and mom would be like, "Are you kidding me? We've been telling you that for 5 years."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So you said just a minute ago, I wanted to double tap on. You said the fundamentals of leadership. What did you mean by fundamentals?
And I think there are, however you want to capture different leadership styles or different approaches to leadership, I still think there's some fundamentals such as transparency, particularly today. It's never been more important. Like, I want to know why you made that decision and, where it came from. I think we've equipped the population with an expectation of information, and that's totally fair, right? That's one. I think capacity to communicate well, super important, and above and beyond that, why is that important? Because trust is the most important thing, I think, in any leadership domain right now. And having, been at the table on the LinkedIn executive leadership team, and we went from 400 to 4,000, from 2 countries to 17, and from 2 offices to 26 in less than 4 years. Like, I'm doubling the size of my company, adding new countries and offices every month, and we're doubling revenue while we're adding all these people. That is complete nuts. It is complete. Stuff's breaking, stuff's on fire. And if you don't have trust on your leadership team that we're steering, yes, stuff's breaking and, this plane's taking off and the wing isn't totally built yet, but we're taking off. If you don't have the trust, people are going to question it. They're going to pause. They're going to cross their arms. They're going to, cause, sand in the gears, if you will. And so that's a real fundamental. And I would say over the course of my career, having started working in the mid 80s, the need for that has never been greater right now, for trust to be a core element. In fact, I would even go say, and this is something I impart on a lot of the folks that I'm coaching, you need a trust strategy today. What's your trust strategy? That whole, you're lucky to have a job, you're lucky to be here, you're lucky to have a scholarship. It doesn't work anymore for college coaches, right? And for me, I think college athletics has been a great lesson for me to use with business leaders. You and I were talking off air around, business borrowing from sports and sports borrowing from business. But so one of the biggest frustrations a few years ago, my clients had was, Steve, people just aren't staying. They're just not loyal.
Yeah.
And that's coming from a place where most of us were taught winning comes from people who stay together a long time. You build trust, you build mutual respect, secondhand language, we can go faster. Well, it turns out that today, in a world that's changing faster than ever, in a world that's more transparent to new opportunities, people just have a lot more choice,
Yes.
And so when I go to a leader, people aren't staying as long. I said, okay, well, let me ask you a different question, which is more important than why people are leaving. Okay, well, we can talk about that, but do you think people in the future are going to stay longer? Do you think we're just in a moment in time, and then once we solve that thing going on in the Ukraine and the Middle East and the Strait of Hormuz, things are going to just settle down and people are going to definitely stay in their jobs longer? And the answer is nope. Most leaders think, nope, we don't think people will stay longer. I said, so, okay, that's a problem because everything you built to reward your talent is all built on tenure. The longer you stay, the more 401k you get, the longer you stay, the more promotion opportunities you get. But you just told me they're not going to do that. I said, so let's look at a place where people just don't stay long and there is still success. And I usually start with college basketball. And the longest holdout for the one and done era was Coach K. Apologies to the Duke-haters out there. But Coach K was just like, nope, we're all about pedigree. You're here, we're all about family and it's loyalty. And if you're one and done, we got no place for you. Until he starts losing to Sister Mary School for the basketball challenged, also known as Kentucky. He's like, I got to change. He goes, I got to change. I got to
Coach
get,
Cal. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I got to change because I'm going to keep losing. And so 3-4 years ago, I forget what it is, he has 3 top 10 draft picks on his team: Zion Williamson, Cam Reddish, and RJ Barrett. And he knew they were only going to stay a year. And so as a business leader, the big challenge is, hey, what did Coach K have to do differently? And you can find videos on this. And there's other people who, Fred Hoiberg in Iowa was the first one to really build an entirely new basketball roster and do really well with it. And having given talks in Iowa, that info goes over really well. But what Coach K said was, if I knew that I've only got 1 year with a superstar, I'm doing a simpler offense. They don't have 3 years to learn my defensive strategy and my offense. I'm going to build a simpler defense. I'm going to start onboarding people really fast. The minute you commit to me, you're in the WhatsApp chat group. Boom. So, the business leaders are like, well, Steve, that's hard. I'm like, I don't want to recruit all the time. Yeah, that's what Coach K is doing. And then thanks to COVID, what does Coach K have to do? He has to recruit not just from every high school, from every university in the
Yes.
world.
Yes.
So your job got not 10 times harder, it got 1,000 times harder. And so this is why we were talking off air about, Dusty May, the coach of Michigan, they just wins a national championship. He's like, I'm exhausted, man. I'm going to go to the pros. And there's much better retirement benefits doing that. So nobody can blame him. This is really hard for business right now because we've got this model that most business leaders have. Tenure and longevity of team is the right answer. And recent research that I've done, and it's not hard to get your hands on, is if you take a look at the fastest growing companies in the last 5 years, public companies that have grown as a measured by market cap. So how much the investors say this company is going to make it. Broadcom, which is in the AI microprocessor business, NVIDIA, Google, Microsoft, and Apple. Okay. They've exploded, okay, in terms of their value. And their median tenure right now is hovering around 4 years. If you look at all of them, 4. Okay. So are they crushing it because of all those 30-year people? No. In fact, they're crushing it, you could argue, because they don't have a lot of 30-year people saying, well, this is how we do it, And the best example of this, Chad, is the automobile industry, where the monster in that space right now is led by a guy who's got 6 part-time jobs, and some people would claim he's a bit of a lunatic. The company hasn't even been around 30 years, and Tesla is worth more than Ford, Honda, Toyota, BMW, Mercedes, General Motors combined.
Yep.
Combined.
Yeah.
And so what are they doing differently? They're not hiring people from the automobile industry because turns out doing something the same way for 100 years is a barrier in today's marketplace. And so, but anyway, I love the sports. Like I want to give my leaders comfort. And hey, let's look at the laboratory of college sports is professional sports of college sports and say, yeah, they know their best people are only there 1 year. And what have they learned? So if you're listening to this and you're a business leader and you're pissed off around like people just aren't staying, well, good, that's what sports is dealing with right now. And it's even getting down to the D2 and the D3 level. And then when junior college experience wasn't counted against your college. And then I haven't really read through the latest decision that just came down recently from the NCAA where it's like 5 years max and so forth. But how would you like to be running an organization where someone else is writing the rules and you're not, right? I mean, just go ask Coach Saban how he felt about, like the rule changes and all that stuff. And there's no governance around NIL that satisfies anybody, and Texas Tech's like, oh yeah, we're good with that. So
Cody Campbell, sign me up. He's like, I would love to talk to him. I'm going to get him on the podcast. Yeah.
Right. And so, you might have an angle, but then the rules change and then next year you need a different angle. And that's really frustrating. It's hard to build, consistent, winning organizations in that world. But that's what I find super interesting right now around the world of work and how fast things are changing and how it's those that can adapt and those that can figure out a new strategy. And those 5 companies that I listed earlier and throw Tesla into the mix there, they're winning because they're not doing the same thing all the time. They're winning because they have cultures that adapt. They're winning because they hire people that see the world differently. And that's not how we built business. It's hire for experience. And I want a deep level of confidence that you've been doing this for a long time. And now we're moving into domains like, no, I want someone who thinks about this differently because the market's going to change and our competitive landscape is going to change. And that's just really exciting and terrifying, depending upon where you sit in that conversation.
Yeah, I think it's both, right? Like the thing is tell me what you think about this. Our brain craves certainty. Okay. And so it's kept us alive, 2 million years, whatever. But it's really thinking like, if you look at Elon, for example, I got this from Walter Isaacson, and it's that look at his grandfather. Look at how you talked about how people are raised. So who was his grandfather and what did his grandfather impart? Well, it was exploration, adventure, breaking barriers, limitations. The only limitations that exist are in your own mind. And so like Elon from a young kid, according to Walter, I haven't spent any time with Elon, has had that philosophy developed over time as a child. So I don't think it's actually that surprising when you look back at the origin of Elon or anyone. Like you look at a Steve Jobs or you look at whoever it is, right? Like that they have developed over time this philosophy because I think you said it just earlier. It's like, who are you around? Who's influencing your leadership philosophy? Who's influencing your thoughts, your words, your actions, and your character?
Mhm.
What
Yeah.
are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, as a parent, that's all you're really concerned about is, are my kids in the right circle, and do we have the right behaviors and attitudes and perspectives being fostered? And similarly, when we're thinking about who's that person we're going to put in the leadership position, I've spent an entire career, Chad, dealing with organizations that put the person who's technically proficient in the role of leader with no assessment or a sense of, does a person like being a leader? Are they respected by their peers? Or are they just the sharpest person doing that task? And it's wrecked so many careers. And so what I usually try to do in these situations, say, hey, we need a technical path and then we need a leadership path. And some people, they don't want that. But if you only reward that, if you only praise that, if you only have, all the fame and glory going to the leader, people who are not wired for that, who probably aren't suited for it, are going to pursue that path because that's the architecture you're building. You see what I'm saying? And I've seen that again and again. But you see it in college sports all the time. Hey, that is a great player. Are they going to be a great coach? Who really surprised me, and I never thought they'd be as good a coach as Jason Kidd. Like superstar player, but rough around the edges, and he is an incredible coach. Talk to anyone who's played for him, right? And so sometimes it works. And then sometimes, I mean, this list is long and I don't want to call anyone out of people who are great athletes, not good coaches, right? It doesn't mean the same thing.
What do you think is the difference between the two?
I probably a few things, but I would probably add on the list a high level of self awareness. Like knowing that people want and desire different things than you do, and that there are different formulas, right? Like I love what Steve Kerr did with the Warriors. He basically did what Bill Walsh did in football. Bill Walsh introduced the West Coast offense. Instead of having my receivers go down, I'm going to have them go horizontally, and the defensive backs are just not ready for that kind of speed in that zone. We're going to crush it. And it's still a philosophy that works today. What Steve Nash did was he said, what if I make, instead of two guards, two forwards, and a center, what if I have everyone be a three? Everyone is sort of either a shooting guard or a small forward. Who's going to defend that? It's like I got a great story. Fortunately for me, as a basketball junkie, I had three boys who all love basketball, and the oldest one, he's a fifth grader on a fifth, sixth NJB team, and we're in the championship. Like we got all the way to Los Angeles as a Northern Cal team. We get all the way to LA. We're in the championship. And this team had a huge kid. I mean, this is fifth and sixth grade. This kid was probably 6'2". And all of our kids, like they're intimidated. And we're sitting in the huddle. And one of our kids, who, if we had a captain, he would have been the captain. He was our point guard. And he says, hey, how about we do a triangle and two and we just double team them? So now when you coach fifth and sixth graders, most coaches coach a zone defense or man to man, and an offense to compete against man to man, and an offense to compete against zone. Nobody coaches triangle and two, which is zone and man to man. So we're behind by like 10 at halftime. The kid says in the interview, his name's Teddy. He went on to be a backup quarterback for University of Washington. That's kind of the elite athlete he was. We didn't know it at the time, like just some kid who's good at hoops. So we had three D1 athletes on that team, which I didn't know. My son, not one of them, much to his regret. But so we switched to triangle and two. We shut that kid down. And I remember that kid looking at his coach like, what do I do? Like, I got two guys on me. And he starts turning the ball over. And the other team's like, what do we do? And they had no idea. And that thinking differently, I think, is a core component. If you're asking me, what are some of the elements that you look for? Just think differently about, because a lot of times leaders will say, here's my solution. This is my playbook.
Right.
And if you got an openness to variability in your playbook, I think it's phenomenal.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So, see, what I've noticed with that difference is like the difference, because I was fascinated with that as well as a kid. I played a lot of sports, and my dad was a college baseball player at Arizona and then, drafted by the Detroit Tigers and chose to go to medical school because he's, 4'11". And no, I'm just kidding. Just kidding, pops. But he was small. And so he's like, I'm probably not making it out of the minors. and I'm going more secure route and financially. So where was it going? So I grew up like being around sports and yeah, 49ers. We used to go to training camp and see Joe Montana, Jerry Rice, Roger Craig. I met Ronnie Lott. It's so cool. And Bill Walsh, there's a great story of like coaching these guys. I don't know if you've read this story or heard this story, but Jerry Rice came in the league from Mississippi Valley State and was actually struggling at first. And he was homesick, first time he's been out of Mississippi. And he says, Coach, I'm not cut out for this. Have you heard this story?
No, have not. Have
It's
not.
amazing, right? So this speaks to Bill's leadership, and then he taught this at Stanford in the MBA program, after he's done it at the 49ers. But Jerry comes to Bill and he goes, I'm just not good enough. Like, I can't cut it here. And Bill says to him, No, I believe in you. And we're going to tweak some things and you're going to figure this out. We'll figure this out. And look what Jerry Rice did, right?
Yeah.
Like that career. And there could have been no Jerry Rice, like as we know
Right.
it.
Right.
So when you talk about leadership, right, you talk about a Bill Walsh who was brilliant. I mean, turned around the 49ers, from 2-14 to Super Bowls, which is incredibly difficult. And that story speaks to like, how do you think about, because you've been in the fire, how do you create and build an environment where people can be their best selves, do their best work, and help the organization be successful in the short and long term?
Well, to me, it comes down to one key notion, and that is you have to build the culture for that, and culture, everyone has a little different definition of it. If we had, 100 people in the room, we said, write down what your definition of culture is. There'd be a lot of variability, and that's fine. I like to distill it into a very simple phrase, which is what environment creates the best outcomes for the most people. Right. And having been, when I was at, multiple companies, I was in charge of facilities. I don't know if anyone listening in has ever been in charge of facilities. One thing you learn very quickly when you're the facilities owner for your company, nobody agrees on anything. I want a small cube. I want a big cube. I want a quiet. I want an office. I want more. I want the air cooler. I want to be closer to the bathroom. I want less light. I want more light. And you're never going to satisfy everyone. Right. And so if you think about that, and this is, I think one of the biggest steps I see in leaders is, are you leading from friendship or are you leading from respect? It's the
Mm,
biggest leap for a lot of people, right? First time leaders almost always want to be liked. I mean, let's be real. We all want to be liked. But if you ask a leader, who do you respect more? The person's always like, Chad, you're awesome. You're great, man. Great job. Always, no matter what, you're great. It just kind of loses any kind of merit or value to you. But if they come up to you after saying that and say, hey, Chad, can we talk about that last staff meeting we had? You talked over Susan and Jim raised his hand. You never gave him a chance to talk. And you're really passionate about what you're talking about. But if that continues, those people you're going to lose followers. And here's a different approach that I would recommend. Or did you notice that? And who do you respect more? The person's like, yeah, go for it. You're great. You're great. Or the
yeah.
person who's looking and observing and offering you ways of improving. And the answer is definitely a person. Okay. So be that person, be that person and lead from respect. And I tell you what, it takes a while for you to grow into what is your leadership style, right? Because we are usually some book that we read or some teacher, some mentor we had. But to answer your question, I think the way that you build great leaders is you have a culture where that's important. And I'm really sad to say right now, if I have this question all the time and encourage all the listeners, have this question the next time you get a group of people together. What organization is building the best next generation of leaders in America today? Just start there. You could go country, fill in the blank country.
Yeah.
Which organization in America is building the next best generation of leaders right now? And if there's crickets for more than 30 seconds, I think this speaks for itself. Like, who is it? It used to be General Electric, right? Oh yeah, GE. Who's doing that now? Somehow, if you take technology, and I've lived in Silicon Valley longer than I wanted to, like PayPal, something was in the water at PayPal. You got all these, the founder of LinkedIn was at
Mhm.
PayPal. Elon was at PayPal. The Palantir CEO is at PayPal. There's a Jack Dorsey, Twitter and now Square and some of these other ones. Like, what was there just a great recruiter there, or was there something in the water? Like, what was going? I don't know that they purposely were building great leaders, but clearly there's incredible product visionaries coming out of that organization, just amazing. But I don't know who that is today. I don't, you know? And if you look at the coaching trees, like Bill Walsh has got an incredible coaching tree. Nick Saban's got an incredible coaching tree, like clearly incredible leader, right? And I pitched an idea when I was at LinkedIn years ago. I said, why don't you allow people on their LinkedIn profile to put who they worked for while they were there? Because if you did that, then you'd see a tree. Wow, everyone who worked for Chad, they have a 3x multiplier on their career progression, right? And it's not a scientific process because there's all kinds of people change their mind and pivot and do different things. So it's not super easy to do, but that's interesting to me. Why don't we have a clear set of companies right now building next generation of leaders? We don't. We just don't. I don't know. Did anyone come to mind for you?
No, no, because what came to mind was no, I, what came to mind is like the military, right? Like West Point and the Naval Academy and Air Force Academy and that sort of thing. But it's, in service to the country. It's in that specific domain, not necessarily a company, but that's their philosophy. And they all, like all three service academies say, we're building that next generation of leadership and service to the country, and we're the best and fight for first. And I worked
Right.
at the Air Force Academy. So I've lived that firsthand. But what came to mind for me, Steve, was interesting when you said that was C.S. Lewis, who was colleagues with J.R. Tolkien at Oxford. Yeah. Before they both became famous, they were professors there and they like have lunch once or twice a week and exchange ideas. And he said, when you put first things first, second things are not suppressed, they actually increase. So that's what came to mind. And here's what I mean by that. Like you talked about clarity and communication and trust. So if I'm a clear communicator, which I'm not, I'm working on it. And my
What
goal
do you mean by that, Chad? No, just kidding.
Yeah, so, like, we'll talk offline about
Mm.
this, but, like, my goal is to become, over the next 45 years or so, whatever breaths I have left, to become, just like Charlie Munger talked about, a little less dumb and a little more clear. And so if I develop those skills myself and the people that are listening to this podcast, that applies in every domain. And it's the same with leadership. If I become a better leader or a little less worse as a leader, couldn't I step into anything and learn the skills inside of that domain, to the technical skills, the tactical skills, things like that? But I've got the umbrella of, wow, this is how to best work in an environment. And I think what I'm saying is, long-winded way of saying this, Steve, is like, I think we are so focused sometimes on the competency of the specific skill. Like a doctor, you need to be able to do A, B, and C. But the bedside manner, that's nice. But the bedside manner is actually putting first things first. Because if you don't have good bedside manner, the patient doesn't listen to you and trust you to begin with. And it's the same in organizations and that. And I think we've lost the forest from the trees a little bit.
Yeah. I can't speak to the, athletic space as well as you can and many of your guests, but I can definitely speak to the business domain. And what I've seen over the course of my career is just less and less of an interest in growing leaders and less time in it, a lot of battlefield promotions, less respect for the value of that. And I don't think it's because of anything nefarious. I don't think it's because people are just getting dumber. I think there's some very interesting drivers that are beyond maybe obvious recognition, such as things are moving really fast right now. The lifespan, I don't have the data to back this up, but just my anecdotal experience tells me the lifespan of most organizations is such that I don't know that I'm going to be around in 100 years. So why would I build leaders? I might get disrupted in 5 or 10 years or get bought out or acquired or, go out of business. So I don't know that that's a good investment that we're going to build for 100 years. Another great question for the debate around who's building next generation of leaders is what companies are building to be around in 100 years today in America, right? I would put on that list for me, well, clearly Apple, Netflix, maybe Microsoft, Walmart, Costco, like people like, whoa, they're really thinking. I think Delta Airlines think very highly of Delta Airlines. Tesla's like, we're in the transportation business. No, we're in the energy distribution business. Like that's checkmate. Tesla did something incredibly brazen 5-7 years ago. They said, we're going to give our whole patent portfolio to all our car companies because our competitor isn't a car company. Our competitor is the adoption of electric vehicles. And so we want people to buy more electric cars because even if we give them our blueprints, they will not be able to outdesign us. We know it. I mean, that is like very, very confident, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that is super, super interesting. But that's why I'm disappointed and I kick corporate America in the face a lot because of this lack of investment in leadership. I mean, I have a TikTok channel, Chad, and I've got almost 2 million views on some of my posts out there. And the stories that people tell of the horrific experience they have from leaders there, I mean, it's TikTok. So, like I tell all my friends, if you don't know what's going on in life, go to the ultimate source of truth, go to TikTok. It's got to be true. But so, it's a venting place, kind of like Glassdoor used to be, where people just, vent all their disappointments. But the truth is, we're not investing in leaders to the same extent I think we used to. When I started my career, like we got leadership academies and all kinds of stuff, like, and you're just like, wow. And now the pace is so radical. Things are changing so fast. No one really believes they're going to be around for a long time. So they're just like, man, we got to build this moat quickly and mine it and then let the cards fall where they may. And so I don't, I can't blame people for not investing in it because I think I know what the big drivers are, but it's a big loss for our economy. Yeah.
Well, Stephen Covey, the late Stephen Covey said, start with the end in mind and then reverse engineer. That's one of the 7 habits of highly effective people. And Peter Drucker, Claremont McKenna said the same sort of thing in his way, right? Management professor and business consultant. So it's like, gosh, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius. I mean, you can go back in time have said these things. So if we look, even if something isn't going to be around in 5 years,
Mm,
50 years,
mhm.
500 years. My question is like, won't just focusing on this a little bit better of developing the alignment and the mission and the values and the leadership capabilities, won't that drive forward your company, even if it's not going to be there
Yeah.
in 10 years?
Yeah. Let me give you a very common exchange that we have in my domain of human resources. So, one of the core deliverables for us is recruiting, right? And so we got recruiters, but when we're out recruiting, the usual debate lands on this question. You go to the hiring manager and they say, well, how are we doing on, generating some candidates? How did the job posting go? Like, how many applicants do we have? And then the recruiters go, well, how many people have you called? And the hiring manager's like, well, that's your job. And the recruiter's like, well, they're not working for me. They're working for you. That's your job. You're the leader. I'm here to help you, but you own the recruiting of someone on your team, And if you got to, and that's super interesting to me. It's such an important conversation. And there's no right or wrong answer. There's definitely an answer I think is the better one. Okay. As in the hiring manager owns this. But so that's such a really interesting tell for me. If you go into an organization, and I've interviewed for dozens over the course of my career, and I say, well, who owns recruiting here? And they're looking at me like, well, that's a dumb question. Recruiting owns recruiting. I'm like, really? Are the people that recruiters are recruiting, are those people working for the recruiter or are they working for the hiring manager? Repeat, the name is the hiring manager, recruiter, the hiring manager. And they're like, well, no, that's not my job. Excuse me? Your job is to identify talent, groom the talent, and grow this company. You see what I'm saying? Like,
Yes.
and I think it goes beyond, that's just my little house. Think about that, It's like, no, and I don't think a lot of organizations give that requirement to their leaders. Like, no, that is your job, not recruiting. Well, and I remember here's a great story, and I say this with all due respect. The former CEO of LinkedIn who hired me, Jeff Weiner, phenomenally talented guy, very demanding. Okay.
Okay.
So the company's main product when I was there was recruiting. Okay. We were selling a recruiting solution. Okay. It's a multi-billion dollar business today. Our biggest dysfunction as a company was recruiting people, our own people. Okay. So I want you to see, and I want to explain to the listeners who are not paying attention. I do still have a full head of hair, but it's a miracle that it's there because
Exactly.
I had him look at me and say, that's your job. If our customers find out that we don't know how to recruit, it's game over. You need to fix this. And so here we go. You see what I'm saying? So he's saying, that's your job. I'm like, And I told him, I said, you do realize that our next door neighbor here that has buildings surrounding us is called GOOGLE, Google. And they can outpay us, outbenefit us, outperk us, out childcare center us on-site childcare center. Like Lady Gaga's having sushi over there. And, we've got like my Uncle Joey's coming over for breakfast and, he's bringing his own bagel. Like Google made more money in a day when I started at LinkedIn than we made in a year. Okay. And so he's like, you need to fix this. I'm like, okay, well, this is a full contact sport. There is no way we are going to survive unless everyone is all hands on deck. There's no way because they're going to outpay us, outbenefit us, outperk us, outwork environment, outbuilding, out everything. So you got to give me something. And that moment was what led us to really look at ourselves and say, why would anyone want to work here? And then we got religion on culture. And that's how we wound up beating those people who could outpay us and out everything us. We said, this is going to be the greatest work experience of your life. Can't pay you more, but if we make it, money's going to be a wash because our stock price will be worth a lot. And fortunately it was. So we were true to our, hedge that would happen, but we had nothing, and the only thing we can control is something that costs nothing, the
Yes.
experience of being here. Right. And so roll the tape forward. I got my CEO to finally realize, yeah, we are not going to do this. And it's not about recruiters. It's about being the place the best people want to go to. Okay. That's how and all of you listeners out there are like, oh, I can't recruit. It's not about the hunt. It's about becoming the place that you get hunted, right?
Yes.
That's the checkmate. And that's the story that LinkedIn executives don't want to be told is like, it's not about a technology solution. It's not about some AI screening bot, or it's not about this or that. It's about being the place and becoming the place the best people find. And you don't do that by answering the same, like when someone says, why does someone want to work at your company? You say, because we're nice. We like people. We have beer on Fridays. We got great founders. We got a great product. We're going to make a lot of money. Because all they hear is blah, 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 beer Fridays, because everyone says the same thing.
Right.
And so that experience in the most competitive market for talent on the planet, Silicon Valley, in the 2009 through 2013, when I was there, you put like face paint on and a knife in your mouth. You are ruthlessly recruiting because people can outpay you, outbenefit you. And most organizations today that are struggling to recruit are not looking at it that way. Like, oh, you're lucky to work here. Like, what are you talking about? They have so much choice. You better tell them why you're special. And they just don't get it.
And in 1 minute, you have 60 seconds, Steve. How did you do that? Because simplicity is the highest form of sophistication is simplification. So you got 60 seconds here. How did you make it the best place to work to out recruit GOOGL?
Yeah, GOO. Yeah. We finally realized something that was so obvious in retrospect. Like you said, in retrospect, sometimes you see history better. We said, we're the professional network. Our mission is to help people find their dream jobs. If we're not delivering a dream job for our people, that is disingenuous. We have to be the place where people have the best career experience. And it just made sense. And when what you're doing on the outside to your clients and your customers and users is the same thing you're doing on the inside, it's not a poster on a wall. It's not like, oh, be nice and trust and customer number one and loyalty and honesty, integrity. It's none of that. It's career transformation. That's what we're about inside, and that's what we're about on the outside. Are you excited by that? Okay, come here and make the culture better. Not be told, not read the tablets the founders came down from the mountaintop and said. And so that is, finding that your true north is worthy is how we were able to. And I'm oversimplifying because you only gave me a few seconds, but I've worked with sanitation companies and I'm like, what are you guys in the business? Oh, who wants to work here with sanitation? I go, no, you're making the world safe for children. Can you get around that? Oh yeah, we can get around that. Okay, everyone's got an angle, you got to find it.
Yes. And you have to live it.
Right. It's got to be here. It can't be something, on your badge that you look at. Oh, why are we here? Oh, let me read it off my badge, like, no.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of my mentors says, let's involve the head, the heart, and the hands. And if exactly, I've worked in multiple places where I walk down the halls and I see the words on the walls, and I know that people, whether they're living it or they're not, and whether I'm contributing to it being better or worse every single day, every single step.
Exactly.
Steve, thank you.
That's it. I feel like this has gone by so fast, man. We got to do a part 2 here.
Let's do a part 2, my friend. I'm going to text you my cell phone.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. And you have the choice to text me back. Any final thoughts that you want to leave here before I?
Yeah, I think last thing is, listen, we are in a moment right now, and wherever you work, where we're facing newer things faster than any time in history. And all of us grew up being taught when you face something new that you've never done before, phone a friend who's done it. And that friend doesn't exist today. So I like to say, it's stop looking for the benchmark because it isn't out there and start being the benchmark. Okay. And that means building cultures of experimentation. If you are command and control in this world right now, you're toast. You have got to be a place where you're letting people experiment and try new stuff, particularly with AI, and experiment and learn from the failures. You have to be that. You have to be that place, and that's how the one and done. That's how Coach K. He's like, oh God, I don't know how we're gonna do this. You figured it out. You figured it out, and his team did, and you can too. And take joy in the fact that we've got a crazy new landscape that we can build a better future in. And that hopefully fuels you through the terror that you feel having to face so many new things in the world right now.
Yeah.
So that is my offering in closing. But Chad, thank you so much for what you're doing. A big fan of your work, and looking forward to more stuff together in the future.
Me too, Steve. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and if you liked it, please share with a friend on social media. That goes a long way to promoting this podcast so I can continue to interview and share these conversations with fascinating people. You can follow me on social media, Chad Stoloff, and visit my website, chadstoloff.wordpress.com, for more information. I'd love it if you would leave a review to support the podcast. Thanks so much. Until next time.